it is really important for you to realize that when I'm talking about history, a lot of times I'm making things up as I go. I don't really, I don't really know a ton of history, and so the fortunate thing is Shakespeare didn't either. I mean, he had read a lot of the books, but his history is definitely a little bit screwed up. It doesn't flow quite with the history books, but and it's very condensed. Okay, in William Shakespeare's Julius Caesar rules over Rome for all of about 2 weeks. Yeah, and it was a little bit more than that. So let's talk about history. All right, so you guys have had world history at some point. Great. Somebody take over.
Last year.
No, nobody knows anything. Good. So, the Roman Republic, okay, was around for a very, very long time. All right. We're talking thousands of years. And in any case, it was ruled as a republic with a senate, and a lot of American, politics are based around the ideas of the Roman Republic. In any case, so while the Senate was ruling over Rome, there was this first triumvirate, okay, of Julius Caesar, Pompey, and a guy that nobody remembers. Well, Julius Caesar was out conquering a lot of the world, and he wasn't really getting sanctioning from Rome before he conquered more and more land in the name of Rome. But he expanded the Roman Empire into England and France. They called them the Gauls, and so the Roman Empire was growing huge. It was way outside of Italy at that point. And Caesar was really unbeatable almost. And so Pompey made friends with the Senate again and started to try and settle down things going on in Italy and Rome. And so they sent word to Caesar that he was being ordered home. Well, this was a problem, because if Caesar came home, he could be accused of war crimes because he was, going beyond directives of the Roman Senate. And so he didn't feel like it was a wise decision for him to just come home and maybe get in trouble. And so he took his army and marched on Rome, starting a civil war with Pompey. Ultimately, Caesar was victorious in this civil war. And he named himself dictator for life. He did not break up the Senate, however. And so, at this point, what kind of ruler was Julius Caesar going to be? This is confusing for a lot of people, because Julius Caesar, one of the first things he did with his power was he started setting up funds for veterans who had retired. He started creating welfare programs for the poor. Everything he did was for the good of the Roman people. Now, this is smart politics, because in order to remain in power, one of the key things is having the support of the majority. And instead of catering to the rich like many politicians before, he catered to the poor. He gave them food. He gave them entertainment. He put on some of the biggest gladiator festivals ever. And I mean, he was really catering to the common people. And so the people who didn't like Caesar were senators and people who supported Pompey. And these guys were really worried about what Caesar was becoming, because everybody adored him so much that he was gonna, take over. Well, Caesar decided he wanted to be king. And this didn't sit well. But the Roman people had no problem with it. So in the play, they're going to talk about Caesar being crowned, and he's going to wear his crown everywhere except for Italy, which means that he'll be king over all the Roman territory he has conquered. But he will still only be dictator and the head of the Senate in Rome and Italy. But that kind of power is ridiculous. You know, we're talking about way more powerful than any person who has ever lived. You know, having that kind of power over that large of an empire. All right, so a group of senators are having this problem. Now, this is kind of history, but now we're going to the play. In the play, we start off with a guy named Caius Cassius, who is definitely worried about Caesar. But he's more worried about the fact that he's about to lose all of his power. Because if there's only one person in charge of everything, if there's a king over Rome, then there's no power left for anyone else. So how can he continue to advance if now Caesar is going to be king for the rest of his life? He's not related to Caesar. A king has to have offspring to take the crown. No more elections, no more republic. And so Cassius is not interested in the good of Rome. Cassius is interested in his own future. He's got a friend named Brutus. Now, Brutus is a good friend of Julius Caesar. And Brutus doesn't want to kill Caesar. He doesn't. He loves Caesar. But he truly loves Rome. And it is really, really hard for him as he's imagining this idea of killing Caesar. All right, so here's the problem. First of all, this play should have been named Brutus. Okay? Because it's called The Tragedy of Julius Caesar. But it's the only play that the title character doesn't even make it through the third act. Julius Caesar dies pretty early in the play. He makes it about halfway through. And so, is this play really about Caesar? Not really. This play should have been named Brutus. And Brutus is the tragic hero of the play. And so the whole thing centers around Brutus. It finishes with Brutus. But Brutus doesn't put butts in seats. Julius Caesar does. And so the play is named Julius Caesar for strategic reasons, you know. That's what's going to get people. That's going to make people want to come see the play. But the murder of Caesar was just the beginning of the story. Okay? So Cassius is running everything. He is convincing everybody to join this conspiracy against Caesar. He's approaching them one by one. He waits a long time to add Brutus, though, because he's really worried about Brutus. He thinks that Brutus is not going to be able to kind of keep this secret very long. Okay? And so he gets everybody else involved before Brutus. But everybody who gets involved says that they won't stay involved unless Brutus does agree. So all the other conspirators are like, we are totally in if Brutus joins. If Brutus doesn't join, we're out. So, really, this play starts, Caesar's on his way into a festival. If you read Act 1, Scene 1, there's a couple of non-entity characters named Maurolius and Flavius, and they're scolding common people for celebrating Caesar after, he's killed Pompey. And so, in any case, they're tearing decorations down off of Caesar's statues. And one of the first things we hear in the next scene is that Maurolius and Flavius were silenced for opposing Caesar. giving you just a little bit of an idea about how powerful Caesar is and how scary it is to defy Caesar. In any case, so as Caesar's walking in, a soothsayer says, "Beware the Ides of March." And Julius Caesar's like, "Who said that? Bring him over. Let me look at him." Now, a soothsayer is a fortune teller. And so this fortune teller says, "Beware the Ides of March." And Caesar's like, he's a dreamer, whatever. And so he kind of blows him off. And Caesar says a few things throughout the play about how he doesn't need to fear anyone because he's Caesar. He almost believes that he's like a god at this point. And so he just kind of blows it off. But he talks to Mark Antony. He pulls him over because he sees Cassius, a guy who we know he shouldn't trust. He sees Cassius and says, "What do you think of Cassius?" And Mark Antony's like, "I like Cassius. He's fun." He's like, "Yeah, but he's not fat enough. I want to be surrounded by fat, bald-headed men." But he's not talking about people who are literally fat and bald-headed. He's talking about people who are satisfied. He says that Cassius has a hungry look, meaning that he's hungry for more power, and he's not just satisfied. And so Caesar says, "But listen, Mark Antony, I'm not telling you what I'm afraid of, because I'm Caesar, so I don't have to be afraid of anything. I'm just telling you what you should look for to be afraid of. And if I were someone else, he's the kind of person I would fear." And so his own ego is his tragic flaw. In any case, so Brutus and Cassius, they have this big conversation. Remember, the whole play hinges on whether Brutus can if Cassius can convince Brutus to join. And so while they're talking, they hear 3 big cheers from the crowd. And they don't know what it is. They find out later from Casca, who pretends to be an idiot so that people think that he's not plotting and planning. He's actually pretty smart, but he just kind of pretends to be dumb. Well, Casca comes out and he says, "Well, Mark Antony offered Caesar a fake crown just for fun in front of the crowd. And Caesar pushed it away. And the crowd cheered because they were happy that he pushed it away. Because they think that means that Caesar doesn't want to be king and Rome shouldn't have a king. Well, he offered it to him again and Caesar pushed it away and people cheered again. And he said Caesar looked really pissed off about this. So maybe Caesar had plotted the whole thing. The third time he offered Caesar a crown, and Caesar went to push it away and everybody cheered, Caesar fell on the ground and had a seizure because he was so angry. Yes, Caesar has a seizure. In any case.
That's a tongue twister.
Yeah. So there was, they did say that Caesar was epileptic, or they believed he was epileptic. Oh, also, did you know Caesar was the first person ever born by C-section? What's the C stand for again? Caesarean section. Yes, it's named after Julius Caesar. Is that crazy? Anyway, he also had a salad and a pizza joint. No.
Right, that's enough jokes.
The first one wasn't a joke. But in any case, he pushes it away. He stands back up afterwards, and everybody's like freaked out because they're like, was he really that mad? Did he really want the crown that bad? And Caesar says, "Oh my gosh, if I did anything weird right before, that's because that happens right before I have seizures. It's like wasn't even me." And everybody's like, "Oh, okay, yay!" Because everybody can hear what a person says when they're sitting in a seat inside of a giant stadium, Coliseum. He must have had his microphone. Anyway, so anyway, Brutus and Cassius have this talk, and Brutus is like, "We're going to have to talk more, okay? But I see what you're saying. I love Caesar, but it's not about what Caesar is now. It's about what he'll become if he gets crowned." Well, then we like flash forward to the night before they're going to kill Caesar, and Brutus still hasn't decided. Cassius has been writing fake letters from the Roman people to Brutus, hundreds of them, leaving them all over his house, hanging them on his statues, putting them in his windows. And every one of these letters that he finds says, basically, the Roman people are hoping you do something. We really need your help. We can't have Caesar do this. But he believes all the Roman people want Caesar gone, but they're afraid to say it out loud. He thinks that the people secretly don't love Caesar. They just are acting like they love Caesar, which wasn't the case. The people loved Caesar. But Cassius writes all these letters over and over and over again. And so when he talks to Brutus that night, Brutus is like, all right, I'm in. We're going to do this. We're going to kill the serpent in the egg before it's dangerous. And so they're like, okay, cool. So they get all the conspirators in there together, and they're like, how are we going to do it? And Brutus now is in charge of the group. Up until now, everything's been done very carefully by Cassius and done very well. Unfortunately, now that Brutus is in charge, nothing's done well anymore, okay? Because Brutus wants to be honorable. He wants to do it the right way. He says we should kill him in a public place. We should make it a public act. We should let everybody know we did it, and we should explain why. Okay? This is for the good of Rome. This is the right thing to do, and it has nothing to do with our own personal desire for power. Okay? Which is not true of anyone except for Brutus. And so at that point, they're like, what about Mark Antony? Mark Antony is Caesar's right-hand man. He should probably die too. And Brutus is like, what? No. Mark Antony can't do anything to us once Caesar's gone, which was completely wrong. And so they finally figure it all out, and they decide that they're all going to go to Caesar's house in the morning and meet him and take him into the Capitol where he's supposed to get a crown. And so they're going to make Caesar think that they're all coming up to his house in the morning because they're supporting him being king. All right? Well, this is, an ego thing. Brutus's wife comes out after everybody leaves, and she's like, who are all these people? Who are these people? What's going on here? And he's like, listen, don't worry about it, woman. I'm not going to tell you. And she's like, listen, I am a tough woman, and you can tell me. She's like, and this is the weird part. She's like, in fact, you want to know how tough I am? Look at this. And she like shows him her leg, and she's like stabbed herself in the leg. She got like a knife hanging out of her leg. And he's like, what? She's like, look, you didn't even know I had a knife in my leg. Huh? Do you see my poker face? Do you see what a tough woman I am, that I have a knife in my leg and you couldn't even tell? And he's like, oh my gosh, Portia, you are awesome. Oh my God, I'm going to tell you everything. I had no idea. You're really awesome. Yes. Oh man, that is so cool. Did you have the other one? No. Okay. You should take that out and get that looked at. But he tells Portia everything. Well, that night, it's horrible. There's a meteor shower, and there is a legend that there was a meteor shower the night before Caesar was. But there's other things. There's ghosts walking the street. A lion has a baby in the middle of the town square. And I guess there were more lions walking around in ancient Rome. I don't know. There's women reporting that mobs of people on fire were running through the streets, and there was an earthquake, there was a storm, there was a meteor shower, there was like a million things that happened, right? And so that next morning, Caesar's wife wakes up and she's like, I had this dream that you got murdered, and last night a lot of omens happened, and I think that you're gonna die if you go to the Senate today, so stay home. And he's like, but there's a crown. And she's like, yeah, I tell you what, all of this stuff doesn't happen when Joe down the street dies. This kind of stuff happens before a king dies, and that's you. So don't go to work today. Capiche? And he's like, okay. He's like, I'll stay home. I'll say that I'm sick. And then Decius shows up. Now, Decius is one of the conspirators. And he shows up and he's like, Caesar, let's go. Let's kick it. Come on. And he's like, you know what? I'm glad you're here. I'm not going today. And this is an awkward part because at that point, his wife's like, tell everybody he's sick. And he's like, what? You want me to lie? I'm not going to lie. She's like, but it was your idea. Anyway, he's like, just tell him I won't come. It's the will of Caesar. I'm not coming. And he's like, okay, but I got to tell you, if you don't come, everybody's going to think you're afraid. I won't, because that'd be like treason. But people might think you're afraid. They might even think about not giving you that crown that they're planning on giving you today. Oh, did I let that slip? Whew, I wasn't supposed to tell you. They're going to give you a crown. Well, Caesar's like, I don't know. Maybe I should go. And then Brutus shows up. And Decius Brutus shows up. And all these conspirators start rolling in. Cassius. And he greets each one of them. He's like, hey, look at you. Oh, you too. Oh, my God. What are you guys here for? We're coming to take you to the Senate to get your crown. And he's like, Then Mark Antony shows up. Guess what? Mark Antony actually is showing up to walk him to the Senate to get his crown. He doesn't know what these other guys are doing here. And he's like, you know what, guys? Let's have some wine and let's all go to the Senate together. And Calpurnia, you are silly. And I'm not listening to you. Yeah, she was right. Anyway, so they go to the Senate. On the way in, there's this guy standing on the street. I think his name's Artemidorus, and he's got a letter that he's reading out loud to the audience that lists all the conspirators. And he says, I've heard there's a plan to kill you, and all you have to do is read this letter, and you might live. And as Caesar's walking down the street, he's like, Caesar, read this letter. And he's like, are you crazy? What's wrong with you? He's like, this really matters to you personally. And Caesar, of course, is like, well, the things that matter to me personally should be last served because I'm a man of the people. And he won't read the letter. Then the soothsayer walks up. And Caesar's like, oh, Ides of March, that's today. Looks like I'm still here. And Soothsayer's all like, yeah, but day's not over. Good luck. And so in they go into the Senate. Well, it's really strange because once the Senate comes into session, people start coming up, Decius Brutus and some of these other guys come up kneeling in front of Caesar, asking for this one guy's brother to be allowed back into Rome because he's been exiled. And Caesar's like, what? That's why you walked me in here today? And then someone else comes up and begs. And Caesar's like, I don't change my mind. I'm like the North Star, even though we saw him change his mind 3 times at the beginning of this scene. I am fixed like the North Star. And all these people keep coming up and kneeling in front of Caesar, begging him to change his mind about exiling this guy's brother. Until Casca is all the way behind him. And Casca is the first one. He stabs Caesar in the back. Shink. I wonder where that term came from. Anyway.
It's a really sharp back, apparently.
Yeah. So, at this point, everyone has to stab at least once, right? Only one of the guys isn't there. I think it was a lot of, I can't remember. Trebonius, who took Mark Antony to show him the new speakers in his car or something to get him out of there so he wouldn't be there when it happened. Well, they all stab Caesar. All the senators freak out and run. All of Rome's going crazy. And so what do these conspirators decide they're going to do? They're going to wash their hands in Caesar's blood. Not good social distancing. And so they all wash their hands in Caesar's blood. And they're like, let's wipe your weapon. Everybody get blood all over you. We're going to walk out with our hands in the air, screaming, peace, enfranchisement, this and that. And so they walk out. And so Brutus says, Cassius, you go to that end of the street, get some of the people together. I'm going to speak to the rest of them. And Brutus is going to give this big speech where he convinces all the people of Rome that Caesar needed to die. Okay? It starts, friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears. And this is an awesome speech. You know, we talk about ethos, pathos, logos. He's got the ethos because he's Brutus. Okay? He's got the pathos because he's covered in Caesar's blood. And he's got the logos because he is going to explain that Caesar was too ambitious for his own good. And as he goes through this speech, the crowd starts to turn and join him until everybody's happy, everything's good, and they're like, I actually left out a really important part. And so they're like, let's carry Brutus home on our shoulders. He can be the new Caesar. We love Brutus. And Brutus says, no, you can't. Because before Brutus left, Mark Antony came in and shook the conspirators' hands and said he would follow them, but he just wanted a chance to have a funeral for Caesar. And so he's like, listen, Mark Antony is going to have a funeral for Caesar. He's going to say some good things about Caesar. We're letting him do it. And I'm going to go home by myself. Okay? And so Brutus leaves. And he leaves Mark Antony there with all the people. He gives him the platform. He's convinced all the people to join him. But he lets Mark Antony, because Mark Antony has promised he would say nothing bad about Brutus. Well, Mark Antony pretends like he's going to say nothing bad about Brutus. But he's like, hey, you know what? These guys said that Caesar was ambitious. Sure did seem ambitious. Think about all the money he gave you guys and all the food. That was ambition, right? And the tears he wept for you guys and the way he helped the poor and the way he helped the retired people. Gosh, look at all that ambition. But Brutus says he was ambitious, and Brutus was an honorable man. And he's like, here's Caesar's body. You know, he was a good friend to me. And so he says, I tell you what, though, I've got Caesar's will. And if I were to read you Caesar's will, I have a feeling that you guys would be pissed off and you'd go hurt Brutus. So I can't read it because he's an honorable man and I'm speaking by his permission. And the people are like, wait a second, you got Caesar's will? Read the will. He's like, nah, I can't. It'd be bad. Like, no, seriously, read the will. He's like, well, first let me show you Caesar's body. And he pulls off the cloak. Caesar's got all these stab wounds. And he's pretending like he knows who stabbed where, but he wasn't in there. He's like, look, this was the most unkindest cut of all, because this is where Brutus stabbed him. When Brutus stabbed Caesar, Caesar did turn and say, Et tu, Brute? And Mark Antony calls this the most unkindest cut of all, because Brutus was Caesar's angel. And so the people are now getting enraged. And he's like, well, okay, if you're going to make me read the will, I'll read the will. He pops open the will. In the will, it says that Julius Caesar has left every Roman citizen 75 drachmas, and all of Caesar's lands are to be converted to public parks for everyone to enjoy. It's like the nicest thing ever. And Mark Antony is like, yeah, this was your ambitious Caesar. I hope we never have another guy like that in charge. And the people now are an angry mob. And they run off to try and kill all the conspirators. And the conspirators have to run out of Rome, being chased out of Rome. They're so angry. One of the conspirators' name is Senna. And they come across a poet named Senna. And they kill him just because his name's Senna. And he's not the same guy. So this angry mob. So right about now, Caitlin woke up. Right about now, Octavius Caesar comes into town. Now, Octavius Caesar was Julius Caesar's nephew, but he adopted him, which means that if Caesar had been king, Octavius would have been his heir. if he hadn't had any other children. And Calpurnia couldn't have children. So, in any case, now Mark Antony, Octavius Caesar, and who Caesar liked so much, he made him part of the calendar. October. Caesar created the Julian calendar that we use today, by the way. In any case, so a guy named Lepidus, who's a soldier, these guys become what's called the Second Triumvirate. Brutus and Cassius are now outside of Rome, and they hire a bunch of soldiers. And we're going to have a second civil war. This one is going to be between Antony, Octavius, and Lepidus, and Brutus and Cassius, who are out in the field. And Brutus and Cassius have separate armies, and they're already fighting because apparently Cassius is selling the offices in his army for money, for profit, to help fund his war. And Brutus is real mad about that. And Brutus sends to Cassius for some of this dirty money. And Cassius says no. And Brutus is ironically pissed that he's getting the money this way and that he won't give it some to him. But anyway, they make up and they get ready for a big fight. And then Julius Caesar's ghosts come in and talks to Brutus and says, "I'll see you at Philippi." And so at this point, if I'm Brutus, I go anywhere but Philippi. But that's exactly where they go to fight their battle. And so there's a lot of war after this. There's a lot of, drama. It all goes down on Cassius's birthday. But that's the short and the long. I'm not going to give you the big ending, even though it's in every world history book. But this is a play, like I said, about Brutus and Brutus's conflict as a person, trying to decide if I should murder a friend. Now, historically speaking, has anyone ever heard of Dante's Inferno?
Yeah.
Where he wrote about the layers of hell. How hell is multi-layered and it gets worse and worse as you go down through. And then when you get to the lowest level of hell, the seventh layer, yes, you get to the very bottom, like Satan himself is this giant creature with 3 mouths, 3 different faces and 3 mouths. And inside of his mouths in Dante's Inferno is Brutus in one mouth, Cassius in the other mouth, and Judas in the third mouth. Because according to Dante, the worst sin that anyone could possibly commit is murdering a friend, betraying and murdering a friend. And so they say these giant rake-like teeth constantly are ripping them to shreds, and they're constantly like healing and continuing to be ripped to shreds. That's all Dante's Inferno. So that's like just an idea as to how history has looked upon Brutus, because killing Caesar did not save the Republic. In fact, that was the end of the Republic. And so from that point on, you're right, we didn't have dictators in Rome. We had Caesars. We didn't have kings. We had Caesars. They named them Caesar. Okay? That became the title. And so when you look back at history and you hear about Caesar, you're probably not hearing about Julius Caesar. So now we have the Roman Empire. Started as a republic, became an empire. You saw that happen in Star Wars. It can happen. And it wasn't really the fall of Rome. I mean, they lasted a couple thousand more years. And then it just got too big, and Constantine switched them to Christianity and all kinds of stuff. But like I said, I make up a lot of the history I talk about. So this is the play we're going to be reading. You'll notice on the calendar that we're going to do a tiny little reading each day and get a question each day on the previous day's reading. And this play will pretty much last to the end of the school year, which is the 22nd. there will be some kind of test, some opportunity, a test that can improve your grade but can't hurt it at the end. So that's Julius Caesar in a nutshell.